and welcome. My name is Carol Essex and welcome everyone to Etobicoke Climate Action's webinar, Words Matter. And words indeed do matter. They do make a difference. Some people have signs at protests saying deeds, not words, but you know, it's the thought and then it's the word and then it's the deed. So the words are part of the pathway to get you to where you want to go. I'm pleased to say we have two delightful speakers for you this evening, but before I introduce them, I want to acknowledge that this land here in Etobicoke is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are on Turtle Island and under the covenant of the dish with one spoon, which holds that the gifts of the earth are all in one bowl. They are all to be shared from a single spoon. In the Indigenous worldview, the earth exists not as private property, but as a commons to be tended with respect and reciprocity for the benefit of all. The last part of my quotation is from a marvelous book, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And if you haven't already read it, I highly recommend it. And of course, just in the last few days, there have been up to 54 unmarked graves of children that have been newly discovered in Saskatchewan at 2 residential school sites. And we need to acknowledge the many grievous wrongs that have been done and take the steps necessary to reach true reconciliation so that the healing can begin. And now I would like to introduce one of the founders of Etobicoke Climate Action. Actually, Tim and I and Alex and Brian, who is here with us tonight, are founding members, and there are some other founding members who I don't mean to leave out. Well, Bob is here, and there are other people. If I start going on the names, I'm going to forget someone, so I'll just say all the others. So Alex Cameron is our tech guru for this evening, and I'm going to pass it over to him. Thanks, Alex.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. As Carol said, one of the founding members of Etobicoke Climate Action. I just posted a link in the chat that takes you to our mission statement. I'll also mention that as the tech guru, I just feel it's important you know that there's some problems with the website right now, and that's because we're going through some changes and there's a bit of a problem. But anyways, the mission statement is correct, and it just says that we're non-partisan and we're working on the climate crisis. That's our primary mission. And so our 4 key values are care for the environment, retrofit of existing buildings, green transportation, protection of the natural environment, and meaningful reduction of waste. How do we plan on doing that? By advocacy, by making sure that we get all 3 levels of government to work on these issues. And the other thing we really want to do is share information. So we've got a fair amount of links to ongoing things. Join our mail list and you can hear what's going on. And we act as a group coordination center. And again, we're fairly new at this and we haven't got all of our stuff together, but we're going to have more and more links to different groups that we're working with. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, we're still, we just formed really last spring of 2021. And we've been kind of evolving and getting things together ever since then. So our first speaker is Cheryl McNamara. And when Cheryl is speaking, we will all be muted. So if a question occurs to you, we would ask you to please put it in the chat. And we'll have a question and answer period at the end of Cheryl's presentation. And Cheryl is the Media and Advocacy Coordinator for Kairos Canada and has more than 25 years experience in communications management. She has worked for a national and grassroots organizations that include the Holland Bloor View Kids Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation, Easter Seals Canada, and the Toronto Arts Council Foundation. She is a devoted climate activist. Cheryl founded the Toronto chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby in 2010 and has lobbied parliamentarians, US lawmakers, and the World Bank to put a price on carbon. Once upon a time, Cheryl was a professional actor, and in her spare time, she writes plays and walks in the woods. And we are so happy to have her with us today. So I turn it over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you very much, Carol, and thank you to the organizers. And it's lovely to see you all here. I'm going to share my screen because I do have a presentation. Okay. Can you all see that? Probably can. Okay, great. Awesome. Thumbs up from Tim. So yes, as Carol said, I founded the Toronto chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. I continue to be a very active volunteer. And just to give you a very brief overview of Citizens Climate Lobby, it is nonpartisan as well, and it has close to 600 chapters worldwide, about 64 active chapters in Canada, from coast to coast. And what we do, what our focus is on building political will for a livable planet. And in advocacy, we focus on what we consider to be the biggest catalyst for change. And that is carbon pricing. We feel that it's a very important piece of this, not to say that it's the only piece, but it is a really important piece. So we've lobbied very hard the Canadian government, and its federal backstop matches more or less what we've been calling for. There could be improvements, but we have been told that our lobby efforts made a difference. So this is to those of you who are toying with or thinking about advocacy, words do matter. And certainly meeting with, communicating with your elected officials is critically important. And this is something that they tell us as well. So in building political will, we meet with our representatives, but we also engage in the media. And part of what we do, a big part of it, is writing letters to the editor. And I will go into why we think this is important. It really is about building political will, and any little piece, it's like planting seeds, right? Also, there was a physicist by the name of Per Bok who had posed the question, how can you predict when a landslide will occur? And the short answer is you can't, it's impossible. And the reason is because there's so many different internal dynamics going that you just can't predict it. And this is certainly, for me, a metaphor for the work that we do as people who are really pushing for positive change in the world. So everything you do, a meeting with a representative, a chat with a neighbor, a letter to the editor, even if it's not published, you're still sending it to the editor, they see it. If it's published, these are all little grains of sand that we are dropping. So letters to the editor, I'll just focus in on that. One of the other reasons why writing letters to the editor is so important is because letters are one of the most popular sections of a newspaper. People like to read what other readers are writing. So, and also politicians and their staff are definitely keenly interested in what people are writing, particularly their constituents. And this also gives them a really good opportunity to gauge what people are thinking. It's also a really easy way, relatively, of getting your views published. And also, I just want to add, letters to the editor, as opposed to comments, online comments, these are curated. So they have additional clout, certainly in the world of the public and in the world of politicians. So how do you increase your chances of actually getting published? Well, here are some tips. So when you write a letter to the editor, typically, with one exception, I'll get to it later, but typically editors are only interested in letter responses to what the paper has constituted as news. So front page stories, for example, that's kind of the most important, followed by editorials and front page stories. So the editorial, you probably all know this, but an editorial is basically the voice of the newspaper. It's usually comprised of an editorial board. There is an editor of the editorial board. And it's usually comprised of a number of journalists. Like in the old days, I know in the Toronto Star, for example, they had about 10 people on their editorial board. And these are people who are, staff writers who would basically write, what the voice of the paper is saying, weighing in on any other issue. Sadly, because of cuts, I think the Toronto Star, the last time I looked, there was probably only 4 people. So it's really cut back, and that I think is across the board as well. So the voice of the paper, front page news, and also staff written columns is also typically when you write in response to a column that they've written, it's going to increase your chances of getting published. Followed by locally written op-eds. These are opinion pieces written by usually experts in the field or people who represent organizations, as well as other letters to the editor. Sometimes you'll see letters in response to other letters. Usually, typically, well, rarely will they publish anything relegated to the back pages, with some exceptions. And I'll get to that in a sec. So when you're writing your letter, please do remember that you want to reference the article as that you're responding to. And say it's a big thing in the news, like say it's COP or say there's a major climate event, you can certainly reference the news as well, because typically in that situation, there's probably going to be a lot of articles, a lot of, columnists weighing in. So you want to do that. Always, we encourage you to be creative. Climate change may not be mentioned in the story. And the example we gave, and this is a very old example, but when the Franklin was, oops, did I jump? Yeah, when the Franklin, the boat was discovered in the Arctic, I actually wrote, climate change was not mentioned, but I did actually write an article, because there is related, the sea ice was actually melting, and that's how they were able to discover the Franklin. And I actually submitted a letter in response to that news about the climate crisis, and they actually printed it. And this is the point that I was getting back to. You can challenge the editor. If there is a really important climate story that the paper decided not to publish or relegated into the back pages, call them out on that. This is such a critically important story. Why is it in page 10? It should be front page news. Another example is a number of years ago, there was a massive climate march that happened in Toronto, and I think it attracted about 10,000 people. It was huge. The Toronto Star did not cover it. I was shocked. So I wrote a letter basically saying, why didn't you publish this? Or why didn't you write about this? And then I kind of gave them like what actually happened. It was like almost like a mini article, and they ended up publishing it. So that's another opportunity as well. So typically letters to the editor are between 100 and 150 words. It depends. Sometimes in local papers, I've seen local papers actually print much longer letters. So it's always a good idea to, sometimes what the paper does is it does indicate the maximum of words for letters. The Globe and Mail is usually about 150. Try and be as short as you can. That I think will also increase your chances of getting published. And remember, sometimes what the editor will do, they might really like your letter, but they will actually make cuts themselves. So if you want to reduce that likelihood, it's encouraged that you do some self-editing as well. And then, and I'm going to get into an example of a letter. But when you start the writing process, you know, ask yourself, what is my message? What is the main point that I want to get across in the paper? We have a lot of points. We have a lot to say about the climate crisis, and they're all really important and valid. It's important to choose what exact point you want to make, and it's great. You know, Alex shared some priorities. If, say, an article is about retrofits, you know, what would you like the government to do about that? What is the actual advocacy message? And once when you know that, you know, you want to make that point in the letter. So I'm going to give you an example of a letter, and this came out. It's in response to an article, I think, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with one of its dire reports. I'm just gonna, oops, great. So, so the title of the article was "Climate Change Report Offers Canadians and the World's Best and Worst Visions of the Future." So that was the name of the article. So you could see that we cited, you know, regarding this article. And this is the start of the letter. And when you open, you always want to kind of cite it, but you want to cite exactly the point that you're trying to make, which I highlighted here. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's latest report is one more reminder that the world is headed towards dangerous global heating, and that limiting carbon emissions to livable levels is possible with strong efforts. So you're taking a piece from the article that you want to highlight and to talk about. This is specifically what you're responding to. So it is possible. It's going to be hard, but it's possible. And this is the point, or this is where I want to start from. So when you transition to your message, you don't have a lot of space or time, so you want to transition quickly to your message. So Canada, as an example, must concede that there is no future in a fossil fuel sector, the growth of which has thwarted its emissions reductions efforts. So citing the problem, you know, we live in a country that is focused on fossil fuel, and that in itself is thwarting our efforts. This is a problem. And Canada's efforts matter. 30% of emissions are produced by small emitters like Canada, which leads this group. What message does Canada send to these countries when it struggles to meet its international climate targets? And then you want to propose a solution, which is the crux of the message. Conversely, what message would Canada send if it, as a fossil fuel rich country, develops a credible plan to retire the sector while leading in green energy development? So the ask is, we need a credible plan. We need to transition out. It's a broad ask, but it's a really important one. And then when you close up, you want to kind of close up sometimes something clever, kind of a strong to kind of bring home the point. So the answer is, you know, it was sent a very powerful message. It is imperative that Canada lead by example. So this is kind of an example of a frame and helpful to some of you who may not have written letters to the editor before, just to help you, just as an example. I also encourage to read letters, other letters that are published, to get a sense of styles and approaches, something that you might like, and something that you'd like to pick up on. So finally, again, it's important not to try and say everything in one letter. There's no room for it, and it muddies the message. So always stick to one point. Remember to add your full name. You'll also need to add your address and phone number, and the editor will not publish it. They do need to verify that you're an actual human being. In the old days, they would actually contact you and say, is this you? But that I see that very rarely. And it's also very rare that they'll let you know that they're going to publish it. So that's where you have to kind of keep scanning for it. So you may or may not be a subscriber to a newspaper. One way to find out, what's out in the world, there's a couple of things that you do. One is if you are a member of the Toronto Public Library, Press Reader is available to you, and it is this service that offers access to newspapers around the world. There are some limitations. Not all newspapers are on it. I don't think the New York Times, and I actually don't think the Globe Mail's on it too, but a lot of Toronto papers are. And basically it's big PDFs of the newspaper. So it'll allow you to actually see what's on the front pages. The other thing that you can do is just maybe send your email to me, maybe direct message. I can put my email in the chat. And Citizens Climate Lobby does have a listserv. So a number of us scan papers, including the Hill Times, which is the newspaper for Parliament Hill, rather important one actually, and we'll let folks know of good letter writing opportunities. So if you're interested in being on that listserv, we can certainly let you know. One thing I should let you know, some papers, like especially the Globe Mail, it's important to respond to an article same day if you can. Second day at the latest. I think there's a bit of more wiggle room with the Toronto Star, certainly with the Hill Times, and perhaps other papers as well. But the thing is, you want to get on it as soon as possible. And oops, I'm getting ahead of myself. Remember, when you're published, please send your email or send an email, or even if and Tim's going to talk to you about social media. But send an email to your member of parliament, or your MPP, letting them know and giving them a link to it as well. And this is another way, you dropping the little grains of sand. You definitely want to let them know that their constituent got a letter published. I typically share mine on social media. Tim's going to jump into tips on that. And my MP is really big on Twitter, and he usually likes my tweets when I copy him. So there you go. I think it's time. I'm going to stop sharing. Oops, no. I'm going to stop sharing and open it for questions.
I do not see any questions. Oh, here's one. Let me see. Here's a question. Do you think it's a problem to submit frequently to the same publication? Would you wait for a bit of time before submitting again if you were published by a particular publication?
That is an excellent question. Thank you for asking it. I'd say go for it. I've noticed, I've actually, because I thought of that myself, I wondered that, but in the past I've had the same publisher publish me like 1 week and then a following week as well. So I don't think there's any hard fast rules around it. Who knows, you might just have a really compelling letter that really encapsulates what others are writing as well. Oh, and that reminds me, really, really important. Please do submit letters, because usually letter editors are looking, and if they get quite a few letters in response to an article, they will definitely at least publish one. So even if your letter isn't published, taking a hockey metaphor, you got an assist. Especially if they publish something that's pretty similar to what you wanted to write about as well. So that's another reason to write frequently. you might be assisting others.
So I'm going to ask Tim now to unmute us in case there's anybody who would like to ask a question to Cheryl. And if you want to ask a question, we just ask that you, if you can, either raise your hand or else put up your reaction hand like that, if you would like to speak to Cheryl. And Tim will unmute us all. Thanks. Are there any other questions for Cheryl?
No, Barbara has one.
Barbara, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, Cheryl, thanks. The Toronto Public Library, I realize what you said about Globe and Mail not being in the press reader, but it's in the regular online part, whatever it's called. Wouldn't it be the newspapers and stuff? Is there an easy way to tell when you look there whether it's an online article or whether it was in the print newspaper?
The way I find out is through press reader. But they do, I mean, online's really important now. Once upon a time, my thinking is that they prioritize what was in print. I don't think it matters anymore. Although it matters in that it's like, where did this article end up in? Is it front page news? So that's why I do go to press reader. Because through work, we do have a subscription with the Globe and Mail, so they have their own. Sorry, the Globe and Mail does have its own type of showing. Sorry, what am I trying to say? It has its own PDF. That's what I'm trying to say. I can actually see what's going on. But again, if you sign up to, say, CCL's listserv, we're scanning, and I will be checking, so I can let folks know if something's front page news or not.
Okay, thank you. You said you were going to put your email address in the chat, maybe?
And I will do that right now.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the question.
Anyone else like to ask a question? This is your chance. I don't see anybody else coming up with a question.
Hi, Rita.
Oh, there's someone. Okay, great.
No, they're just waving at Rita.
Oh, you're waving. Okay.
It's good to see Rita.
Yeah, Rita is a good friend of mine, actually. We've known each other for years. Yeah. So she's one of the reasons that I'm involved in climate issues. For
Oh,
sure.
of course.
Yeah. So anyone else, will just give it another few seconds, and if not, then I'm going to turn it over. First of all, I want to say a great big thank you to you, Cheryl. I have to say that I first heard Cheryl speak at Climate Fest in the fall, and she was doing this same presentation basically. And then I went and wrote a letter to the editor, and I don't think I've ever written a letter to the editor before, and it went right into the Toronto Star, and I was amazed, and my next door neighbor is saying, "Oh, was that you?" It was terrific. So, all of those points she made were so absolutely vital to being able to get the letter in, I think. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And I do want to say, I will send you my presentation, Carol, if you want to share it with folks.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Okay. Also, I'm going to pass it over now to Alex, because he is going to introduce our next speaker, Alex Cameron.
Thanks, Carol. Tim Ellis is going to be our next speaker. Tim has an eclectic background, which includes careers as a rave DJ, farmhand, freelance writer, and bonds market analyst. He worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016, and we are most fortunate to have him and his energy and talents with us here in Canada now. Tim's focused on empowering people to engage with our democracy using cutting-edge technology, blended with tried and tested organization tactics. His work at Lead Now has included some of Canada's largest and most innovative campaigns. He is a passionate and engaged climate activist, not to mention a hell of a lot of help with all the technical stuff. Thanks, Tim, and here, over to you.
Great, thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Very excited to do this. So I'm going to take you through Twitter, and I'm going to cover a few things. First, what is Twitter and how is it used? And then a very basic primer on like the nitty-gritty of how you actually use it. We'll try and demystify the algorithm, and then we'll talk a bit about some of the ways you can use Twitter to effectively advocate for your priorities, including climate action. So let's get into it. I wish I had a nice presentation like Cheryl did. I'm not very visually oriented and my slides always suck, so I just skipped it. I'm just going to talk to you, but I am happy to share my notes afterwards. So what is Twitter? Twitter is an app that describes itself as a micro blogging site, which just means that people can post their own thoughts, but the limit is 280 characters per post, which isn't very long. You can also include short video and photos. Your tweets are viewed based on whether or not, or I'm sorry, you view tweets posted by other people based on whether or not you follow them, or if they are pushed into your feed either by advertising or the Twitter algorithm. And we'll get into that in a little more detail soon. Once you're on Twitter, you can reply to other people who are on Twitter. You can tag them, which indicates you're talking to or about them. You can do something called retweet, which amplifies someone else's tweet by displaying it to the people who follow you. And you can also directly message people. Otherwise, all tweets are private or public rather, but you can do direct messages, which are private. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a minute. Who uses Twitter? So there's a number of different social media apps. There's a few big ones. Twitter is one of the big ones. Facebook is probably the biggest in terms of user base. There's about 83% of Canadians who have a Facebook account. It's a lot. Twitter, it's only about 19% of Canadians use Twitter. And many of those are pretty passive users. Most Twitter content is generated by just like a few really highly active people. But Twitter users skew heavily towards decision makers and influencers. Politicians, journalists, organization leaders, authors, all very frequently found on Twitter. And the reason is because Twitter is fast, it's constant, and it's everywhere. You can quickly get on-the-ground information from people living through a news experience. I'm sure if you're on Twitter, you've probably seen a lot about the convoy, for example, from people who are there. You can get nearly instant rapid response from subject matter experts who are on Twitter. Politicians can very quickly find support and opposition for their ideas and communicate directly with their fans and supporters. And you can get great jokes. Lots of good fun. As a result, Twitter is a platform that is heavily weighted towards highly engaged and influential people, which lends itself to certain kinds of advocacy and campaigning. I'm going to share my screen and show you the Twitter interface so you can get a sense of what it looks like, just so I'm not assuming people have a level of familiarity they don't yet. So let me share my screen here. Hopefully people are now seeing my Twitter homepage. So just so you get a sense of what's going on, this top bit is where I would type my tweet, hey world, and then I would hit tweet to send it. Once I do that, it is broadcast out, and anyone can technically see it, but most people won't. And I'll go over the algorithm that dictates what people see in a bit. You can attach photos and videos, you can add emojis, you can do polls and all this stuff, and then send it out into the world. You can also view other people's tweets, and that is called your feed. And you can see on my feed here, I've got a bunch of different tweets. This looks like an ad. Yep. And just different content being fed to me from other Twitter users. As people use Twitter, this is your homepage. You've also got on the right a set of what is called trending topics. And those are things that are being discussed by a lot of people. And here you'll see there's the NBA All-Star Game. This has got a tag that says promoted, which means someone has paid to make that look trending. You got Tamara and Elon Musk, and then some news. This is all here because it's being talked about by a lot of people. For example, Tamara, which probably refers to the Tamara who was an organizer of the convoy, has 29.5 thousand tweets going on about Tamara right now. So that is a good way to get a sense of what's the big topic of discussion in the zeitgeist. On the left, you'll see there is notifications here. I've got 20 plus notifications. If I were to go there, I would see notifications that are intended for me in particular. And I get notified when people talk about me or to me or respond to things that I have said. Below that is the envelope thing, which refers to direct messages where people are messaging me individually and privately, either one-on-one, or you can have group chats. A few ways to engage with tweets. So this tweet here from Common Dreams, there is a little heart at the bottom that indicates like, which is a way to say, yep, I like this comment. So I like that. And now you see that numbers ticked up to 14 likes on that one. Next to that is retweet. So if I click on that, I have an option to retweet it. And all that means is I will then display this tweet to people who follow me, which increases the visibility for that person who posted it, which in this case is Common Dreams. There's also a chance to quote tweet, which is the same thing, except it allows me to add a tweet of my own to it. And then it would appear as this original tweet plus my own commentary added to it. And then there is reply, where I can send a reply. And what will happen is if I click that, I'll have a chance to put my own tweet forward, and it will be threaded beneath that tweet, viewed as a reply. So anyone who clicks on that tweet will then be able to see any replies. There's one reply here. And if I were to do that, it would be added to that thread. Another way to engage with Twitter is you can see here Common Dreams has posted this tweet. The reason it's in my feed is because you can see above the name of the account, Solidarity Canada has retweeted this. And so I follow them. So since they retweeted it, it's been shown to me. I can also click right on Common Dreams. And then if I wanted to, I'll be like, hey, I like this topic. Seems like a good post. I may want to follow them directly so that in the future, I will see their tweets from them without someone else needing to retweet it to me. So I would just click on follow, and then I would become a follower of theirs. And people can do that to you. The last couple basic bits around Twitter use. There are times where people are engaging with you that you wish weren't. And you can control that by hitting block or mute. So I believe the way you do that is with this little drop down. And there will be, yeah, you can block them or mute them or even report them if it's particularly hostile. And that will prevent them from contacting you or engaging with you. Finally, the last bit is what are called hashtags. And hashtags are a way of assigning a topic to your tweet. And you'll find hashtags. Let's see if I can find one. Here's a good one. This person has tweeted about autism, and they've added at the end a hashtag that says actually autistic. What the hashtags do is indicate topic, subject matter, but they're also a good way for people to find content on topics they care about. So if I were to click on actually autistic, I'm going to see other tweets that use that hashtag. So it's a good way to sort out things. It's also a good indicator for the algorithm to know, okay, if a lot of the same hashtag being used, that's possibly going to be trending. So that's the basic interface. There's plenty of guides out there, so don't feel worried if that was a little overwhelming. I know it's a lot to take in, but there's lots of pretty basic guides to how you use the nitty-gritty of Twitter. But it's not as simple as all that, because behind it, what is determining what is shown to people is this algorithm. This algorithm is designed by Twitter to maximize engagement. Crucially, that does not mean it's going to give you stuff you want to see. It's going to give you stuff it thinks that you will engage with, either positively or negatively. It's important to keep in mind. So that is determining what you see in your feed and what other people see in theirs. It plugs in a few different factors. So it'll look at what kind of content you've engaged with before, who you follow, what you have posted, how often you post, the hashtags that you've used, current trending subjects, all that stuff is factored into the algorithm. And to determine what shows up in your feed in order. And it's useful to understand that, because part of effective advocacy, of course, is getting visibility on what you're saying. So making your tweets more visible is part of your calculus when you're choosing your campaign approach. There's a few things you can do to increase your tweet's value to the algorithm, to make it more likely to display your tweet to others. Adding media, photos, little videos, those are given a little more weight. I will explain tagging in a minute, sure. Recency. Twitter prioritizes the most recent content, which is why it is often helpful to post fairly regularly. One of the top metrics is engagement. If your tweet is getting lots of likes, lots of retweets, lots of replies, then that is escalated up the algorithm pretty quickly. And that is how things go viral. It snowballs. It starts to get a lot of engagement. Twitter thinks, wow, people are reacting to this. I'm going to show it to more people. They engage, and so on. It escalates. The hashtags, it's good to use hashtags because people do follow certain hashtags. They search by hashtag. It also, as hashtags are used, if there's a lot of use of the same hashtag, it is escalated. And then account activity. If you are using your Twitter account regularly to tweet, it does factor that in. It does want you to be an active part of the community. As far as tagging, yeah, when you tag someone, so if you're in Twitter and you are typing a tweet and you want to say, tag me, because you're talking about me or to me, you would just, in the tweet, type the @ key, that little A symbol, and then the name of the account, which in my case, DJ is @DJ Dynamic NC. And so when you do that, it means that that person is notified of your tweet, which makes them much more likely to view it. It is important to note that big accounts with lots of followers are given extra tools because they get a lot of notifications. So they're given extra tools to narrow those notifications, which means you have to sort of overcome those tools if they are someone who you need to influence, but they are not keen to hear from you. Most politicians have a pretty open setting on theirs because they want to know what people think and they want to keep their finger on the pulse. Great. So putting that all together into how you can use that information to drive advocacy. There's a few things to remember. Remember who is on Twitter and why they're using it. So Twitter is full of influencers, journalists, and politicians. These are great people to target. They are people who can make decisions. They are people who are influenced by public opinion. They are looking for the latest news. They are looking for the story. And Twitter is full of people who are interested in talking to and about those people. These are highly engaged folks who can be mobilized very quickly to get content directly in front of other people and those decision makers. Politicians have staffers who monitor their Twitter accounts. All the big NGOs have staffers who monitor their Twitter accounts, keep track of what they're hearing, keep track of their notifications, keep track of what's trending, and use that information in their decision-making process. It is a form of listening. There's a whole business industry called social listening, which does nothing but monitor the trends and monitor the different things people talk about, the tone of their tweets, the frequency of things being raised, and so on. So Twitter is a great way to directly reach those people who are otherwise very difficult to get a hold of. It is also good for finding new, highly engaged potential supporters who can then take action with you, sign a petition, donate, because of the algorithm putting posts in front of people. So it's good for getting visibility for your efforts. It does not have to be a JPEG. There's a question for adding an image. Does it have to be a JPEG? It does not. There's a few different formats. I'm not sure about a size limit. I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So let's talk about a few tactics, ideas for using Twitter to influence elected folks and other influencers and help build your movement. First is replies and tags. This is the most basic form of engagement and visibility. When you tag someone or reply to their tweets, they are notified. Again, if they're very, very popular and have lots of followers, they may have restrictions on those notifications. So they may not see a single reply or a single tag, an individual one. And in that case, a way to get around that is to add engagement to those tweets. So when you reply to them or when you tag them, you get a lot of engagement on that. With enough of that engagement, it goes through their filters so that people can see that they're being tagged, they're being replied to. Another tactic around getting advocacy on Twitter is what's called the Tweetstorm. And a Tweetstorm is just mobilizing a lot of people to tweet the same thing or very similar things at the same time. Again, recency matters to the algorithm. So if there's a lot of people tweeting about the same thing at the same time, you get a lot of additional visibility. If they're all using the same hashtag, it makes it very easy for people to find and join in on that. So people may organically see it happening and join in if they share that interest. And it may, if it's very successful, even make it to the trending side, which is very, very visible. for people. Now, easier said than done, right? Organizing a Tweetstorm means getting a lot of people to do it all at once. It's the classic organizing situation. One thing that we do at Lead Now is we will mobilize people offline to take the Tweetstorm action by planning it ahead, saying, okay, Tuesday at noon, we're all going to tweet this. We will email people in advance, ask them to commit to doing that. We will, in some cases, add them to a group chat so that as soon as it's time, we can send a tweet and say, okay, here it is, retweet this, tweet your own, and then each person goes and retweets each other's tweets about the topic, which expands that engagement and expands the visibility. Another thing you can do is, of course, use trending hashtags to get your message in front of new people. So you can check what's trending on that right-hand side and connect your campaign to the trending topic. And it doesn't always have to be a direct connection. You can be a little loosey-goosey. For example, let's say the World Series is getting rained out, big storm for the World Series. Lots of baseball people are going to be talking about that. And that's a great opportunity for climate advocates to use that hashtag and connect the dots between big storm interfering with their fun and the climate crisis, which is driving the increase in the frequency and the damage of those kinds of storms. Speaking of amplification and getting everyone to engage with each other's tweets, just remember that that engagement is really one of the top pieces that the algorithm considers. So if you have a tweet going live that you want a lot of people to see, it is helpful to drive lots of engagement very quickly. One tactic that we used on the Bernie campaign was we had a series of group chats. And in each group chat was one person who was kind of the coordinator. And then there were 30 to 50 mid-size accounts, 3,000, 5,000 followers, they reached out to and invited in there. And every couple days, the coordinator would give us a tweet in the group chat. And then everyone would jump in, retweet it, quote tweet it, reply to it, engage with it, and then tweet their own tweets as well on the same topic. And that enabled us to drive the narrative trending topics. And they had several of these group chats that were going all at once. So it was a lot of people all coordinated to amplify each other and get the same tweets going with heavy engagement, and then get that topic being discussed in a number of tweets at once. And those chats can persist. The group chats persist until people actively leave them or close them. So it is very viable to build a growing web of Twitter users who communicate via this group chat and are prepared and ready to engage with each other and their own tweets. They share their tweet in the chat, say, I've got one going live, let's all hop on it and engage and amplify each other that way. Another tactic, influencer campaigning. So sometimes people with very large followings may share your beliefs and may be persuaded to amplify or even initiate their own tweet on the topic. When they have lots of followers, it's called influencers. And there's a few ways to get them involved. There are apps or like companies you can go to that do what's called influencer marketing. And all they do is connect you to influencers for a fee, who will then post stuff that you want them to post, and they'll say like, this is sponsored or this is a partnership with someone, and you can pay money for that. And that is useful for visibility. They tend to shy away from particularly controversial stuff, but they will often do like things where there's broad alignment, which at this point, climate stuff is pretty broadly aligned. There's a few holdouts, but we're getting there. So one way to do it is to use those kinds of influencer marketing apps. Another way to do it, and we did this very successfully with Democrats abroad during the 2020 election, just reply to their tweets and ask them to help, especially if they're already commenting on stuff that you care about. In the 2020 election in the US, this was, of course, a lot of people talking about that election. It was a big one. And so when, like Alanis Morissette posted about it, and so we replied to her and said, hey, could you like help us amplify our message? Because we have a lot of Americans living in Canada, you're Canadian. Could you do that? And she did. So they may just reply to you. They may not even see it, but it's worth a shot. They may also have their DMs, their direct messages open. Most big accounts don't, because they'll get barraged, but some do, particularly journalists. Journalists like to have them open because of tips. So speaking of which, reach out to the journalists, let them know. They watch Twitter like hawks because the news is coming right to them. It is a direct line to them. And so if they're seeing the same thing over and over, that makes them feel there may be a story there. if you are doing something that you think is a good story, yes, the press release is great, send it out via email, but it's also great if you know a journalist who's local or covers that beat, great to give them a tip. You know, you're doing a protest outside a politician's office and you know someone who covers that particular thing you're protesting, hit them a DM. A lot of times the DMs are open, shoot them a message, nothing lost. And then the last one, yeah, it's also just useful to maintain an active Twitter presence for visibility. Just notify people of what you're doing, what you're campaigning on. People do scroll through Twitter, and over time, as people see your tweets, they see what you're doing. If they find value in it, they may follow you. And as they follow you, they may retweet you, and that it begins to grow over time. If you're going to do this, if you're going to use Twitter, one thing I would flag is to use it pretty regularly. Doesn't have to be even every day, but an empty or abandoned account that tweets like once every like 6 months is actually often looks worse, because then people may, then having no account at all, people may see that and think, oh, well, they've stopped. You know, they may think there's no more activity. I see a couple questions about DMs. I'll actually go over that in a sec. Last couple things. What Twitter is not good for, local stuff. The user density is just not that high in any given area. So it's not a great way to find, for example, if you're running for office in Etobicoke Lakeshore, it's not a great way to find voters in Etobicoke Lakeshore. There's more efficient ways to do that. I like to think of Twitter as kind of air support for a campaign. Another thing Twitter is not great for, the ads. The ads aren't great. People use it. They do pay for the ads. I find it's not worth it. The way that Twitter works, people don't like the ads. They're not very effective. They ignore them. They actively dislike them. If you have digital, like social media advertising budget, you're almost always better off spending it on Facebook, Google, or Reddit. Almost always. So there's very, very rare situations where you'd want to spend that money on Twitter. And then the last word of warning, Twitter does have some pitfalls. It can quickly suck up a lot of time. So you've got to be very cognizant of, are you getting the value for the time you put in? It is not a substitute for organizing. Part of its value is that it can inflate the perceived size of a campaign quickly, but use that then for what it's good for, which is visibility. Big engagement does not necessarily translate into, for example, votes. And it is also full of bad actors and bots. We're not the only ones trying to do influence on Twitter because it works. And the fact of the matter is there's some pretty bad people out there who are using it nefariously, and you will encounter them. That is people who are there to troll, people who are in fact paid to troll, to cause dissent, to insult, and to chase people off. There are bots which will automate the process of engaging and do it in a way that drives people off, or it's just spammy. You'll encounter those things. Don't be afraid to block those people. Don't be afraid to use the mute button. You do not owe anybody a response. But it's just something to be aware of, because it's a bit of the Wild West. And there is not an outside moderator. You can report tweets and eventually they'll get reviewed, but it takes a while. So you are a little bit on your own. So you have to develop a bit of thick skin and a quick trigger finger on the mute button. Great. I see a few questions there. Yeah, don't feed the trolls is good advice. Cool. I see a few questions, so I'll start going through those. Feel free if you have more questions, throw them in the chat. Where do you find the DMs? So there is an envelope icon on the left-hand side of your screen, and if you click on that, it will open up a list of all of the DMs that have been sent to you. There's also, if you are able to DM someone, which is the case either if they are following you or if they have their DM set to open, which means anyone can DM them, then you'll see a little envelope next to their name when you look at their profile. The difference between block and mute, if you mute them, they don't see any difference. They can still tweet away at you, but you don't see anything. You're not notified. You aren't shown their tweets. If you block them, they are notified that they cannot talk to you, and it registers as they are blocked, and they're not allowed to even tag you at all. What is G and M? I think that's Globe and Mail from earlier.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, no worries. Any other questions on Twitter? How do you use it for advocacy? I'm happy to share those notes with folks afterwards. Oh, yep, Barbara.
When you were giving the Bernie example of the group chat working together, you sort of listed off about 5 steps that they all did together, and it was a little quick, please.
Sure, sorry, I'll go through that again. Yeah, so what we would do, there was a team of people who were these coordinators for this program, and they were in charge of managing a group chat. So one of these coordinators would set up a group chat with people on Twitter who had decent sized followings, 3,000, 5,000 people. They would reach out and say, hey, we're trying to organize some visibility on our campaign. Would you be interested in amplifying some of our tweets? And if they said yes, that person was added to the group chat. And once they went through that process enough times, the group chat would have 20, 30, 40 people. I think the max is 50. And then the coordinator would periodically put a tweet from Bernie or from one of the campaign surrogates into the group chat and say, now's the time, go amplify this, engage with it, and tweet about it. And so everyone in that group chat would see that. They'd go in, they'd like the tweet, they'd retweet it, they'd quote tweet it so that they could add their own commentary, they'd reply to it, engage with it in every way they could to drive up those numbers to increase the visibility. And the algorithm would see that, and because it's coordinated, it's all happening very quickly, which to the algorithm looks like, oh wow, this is hot, like everyone's into this. And that would get much more visibility on those tweets. And they would actually do this through, there was like many of these group chats going. So they could get quite a bit of engagement on a tweet across all of those chats.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. On Twitter, how can I share a poster for an event? A big chunk of posters cut off. Yeah, so the image cropping on Twitter sucks. It's not very good. If you do that, it will crop it so that in the feed, it displays just part of your image. If people click on it, they'll see the whole image, but that's not actually very good because people don't often click through. The best way to get around that, I have found that if it's perfectly square, it's much more likely to center properly and to display pretty much the whole thing. So try and make your images on Twitter perfectly square. And there are like templates. If you use an app like Canva for your posters, there's usually a Twitter template you can use, and that should be set to maximize that. I don't like using private lists. I think it's a popular feature. Oh, really like using private lists. Yeah, I didn't even cover lists. I'm so sorry. Lists are a way to add accounts to a personal list that you run for yourself for whatever purpose you like. So for example, I have a list that is Canadian progressives. And so as I encounter people who are progressive in Canada, I will sometimes add them to that list, which I use because I work in both countries. And so I need to differentiate between Canadian and American activists. And so when I do that, it means I have this list and I can quickly see who's in that list. I can go to that list and see tweets from just that list if I want. And that will enable me to kind of restrict what I'm looking at if I'm looking for some particular subject matter. The people that I add to that list are notified that they've been added to a list. And they have the option then of if they don't want to be on the list, they can block you and then they will be removed from the list. You can also follow other people's lists. And the way to do that, I actually don't do that, so I'm not sure off the top of my head. But typically, I don't want to wing it. What I'll do is I'll look for a little primer on that. I just don't use that feature, so I'm not sure how to do it. But you can follow other people's lists if you like, in addition to having your own. Brian?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Tim. A couple of things. One is I don't think you mentioned profile, and I think that's good for people to monitor their own profile because that shows how many followers you have. But also, when you like someone else's tweet, I often go to their profile to say, okay, let me learn more about you. And some journalists include their email address because they are looking for tips. So that's very valuable if we want to know how to reach journalists on our issues. So yeah, the profile, I refer to that a lot. And of course, your own profile, you want to tailor that very carefully so that it's conveying the message that you want to convey about what you're doing. And you can include your website, or what another cool thing is what's called Linktree, where that's the link that this company called Linktree manages, but you can list several addresses. So you can list your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook page, your website page, and even an event page, like an event notice for an event like tonight. So yeah, that's a cool thing. And then a newer feature on Twitter, which I haven't explored, except I tuned into one of these spaces earlier this week, actually the night in which the emergency measures were announced by the federal government. And I just happened through Twitter get referred to a space which is a live discussion with many people. It's like just audio. And it was these people with the Freedom Convoy. I think you were listening to that too, Tim. I saw you. And you know, it was genuinely shocking to hear some of the things said, like really deeply shocking and offensive. So that gave me a very close insight into what some of them are up to. But can you tell us about, you know, possible uses of spaces?
Yeah, let's talk about Spaces real quick. So Spaces is a brand new feature. It has not been used widely until recently, but it has been rolled out now. I haven't hosted my own space yet, so I'm not well versed in it, but I have attended some. It's just as Brian described, it's an audio only engagement mechanism. Anyone on Twitter can join one. They will appear in your feed as people post them with a link, and you just click on that and it opens up a little sidebar that shows you who else is in that space and allows people to like raise their hand and speak if they like, they take the microphone and they can talk about whatever they want. And there's usually some subject matter that is allocated to them. Yeah, it's kind of a neat feature, and it is quite new. So it's something that's, I think, still being explored by people. And
is it sort of a channel that you can return to over and over again, or just a one-time event?
It's a one-off, so you could create more and more, but yeah, they are one-off events.
Okay.
Yep. Carol?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could show us some of the things in the share screen so we know like how to find some of these things you've been talking about.
Totally. Go back here. So this is me. I'm on my profile right now, so you can see I've got this header image. I've got this is my tag. You can see my followers, my website still on a little bio, and the tweets I've done. Everyone has a profile like this. To the left is these buttons that give you access to different parts of the interface. So this top one is the home screen. This is where I can see tweets. This is what I call my feed. It's also where I go to make a tweet of my own. If I wanted to reply to one of these, like you can see tweets in the feed, you can do replies here, retweet, like, or click on it and see the replies if you want to engage in this conversation. You can also click on this fellow's profile pic, and then you can see their profile information. Below that is notifications. So if I were to click on that, I won't, because then I'll have to go through and check them. I don't want to do that. But if I were to click on it, I would see all my notifications. So anytime someone's tagged me, anytime someone's replied to me, that sort of thing. Below that is DMs. So if I click on that envelope, you'll see different direct messages I have. And so if I were to click on one of these conversations, you'd see the conversation. Below that is, this is my profile. And then below that is this a few extra buttons. This is where you find lists, you find different, like, I don't think anyone uses Moments, but it exists. I don't know what newsletters are, lots of the less used stuff. And then the tweet button allows you to pop up a tweet if you want to share a tweet as well.
So then can I ask, how do you send a direct message again? How would you do that using your screen?
Easiest way, if you want to send a direct message to someone, say I want to talk to this guy, I could, this person actually does not follow me, and I don't follow them, but they have their DMs open. So they've got a little envelope on their profile screen. So if I wanted to follow, I could. If I want to send them a direct message, I would just click on this, and it'll open up a chat channel here. Send it here. And you can add people. So there's multiple people in a group chat if you like. And you can also leave a chat if you decide you're done with it.
Great, thank you. And
Yep.
Ingrid has a really interesting question that I've lost in the chat somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, comment on using real versus fake name. Yeah, good. That's a great question, and I think it depends on what you're using it for. generally speaking, I like to use my real name because it is something that I feel lends credence to my campaign efforts. There's a lot of bots, and there's a lot of people out there who are doing, there's troll farms, people who are paid to just cause problems. And so there's lots of anonymous things. It's actually a good sign of credibility if someone uses their real name. If they are using a real profile picture, which I know I'm guilty of using this animated version of myself instead of a real one, but and also if they are tweeting their own original content, that is a helpful indicator that they're likely to be a real person. A lot of the paid trolls and the bots are just either just retweeting things or only replying to things and are not adding their own original content.
Okay.
Can I? Hi, it's Ingrid.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. This has been really helpful. So if you, are you saying that in order to have credibility, you should either be an individual with your name? So on the profile that you just showed, there's also the handle. There's kind of your profile name and the handle. Can you tell me the difference between the two and how people can identify you?
Definitely. Yeah, the profile name is something you can set to be anything you like. So I often like change like this latter bit to whatever to reference the topic of the day or to make a joke. That is very flexible and very easy to change. I like to leave it, ensure that my real name is in there. I can't leave now because it's under the, okay. Because I feel that does add a little extra credibility. So people know who I am when I'm engaging with them. I just feel there's so much disinformation and misinformation that it helps to counter that a bit. Below that is the handle, which is set your Twitter's rename. That is very difficult to change. You can change it, but that's really your like account official name. And that can be anything really, but I like to have the profile name here. And you can see my handles from when DJing was my top use of this, which is no longer the case, but I didn't want to change it.
So sorry, just to ask one more thing. So your handle is very much like your Gmail, like Ingrid, right? It is that permanent, where above it, where you say Tim Ellis, Democracy Defender, that is a little bit more changeable, and you put your name in there to add validity to that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you can
Great,
change
thank
your
you.
handle, but it's a process.
Got it. Thank you.
No worries. I think we're probably running on time here. I'm sorry.
We're still good. Are there any more questions? Anyone, just put your hand up or put your reaction hand up if you want to speak, please.
Like Barbara's back?
Hi, just one thing I wanted to mention, that I definitely learned stuff tonight. I don't want anybody to misunderstand thinking that I know it all, because I don't, just because I'm saying something different. I find that it's a lovely thing that, as you said, somebody doesn't necessarily need a Twitter account to see your tweets, and there's a way to capture a URL that is just for your tweet in case you wanted to email it or something to people, so that they can still share it and have a link. So I don't know if you want to show how that's done.
Yeah, that's a good flag, a good thing you can do. I'll share my screen again. So if I see a tweet that I really like and I want to share with someone who is not on Twitter, there's to the right of the engagement tools here, the replies and likes and so forth, is this share button. And if you click on that, you've got copy link to tweet, which allows you to get like a URL that you can share with someone directly, and you can copy that elsewhere. Another common way to do it is just to screenshot it. And that's actually quite popular because if you screenshot something, it becomes a photo, and photos increase engagement on basically every social media platform. So put something on from Twitter, put it on Facebook, a screenshot is going to be much more engaging than a link if you were to post it that way.
What are you taking a photo of in this? I don't see anything to take a photo. I mean, you can take a screenshot of anything, but what would you be screenshotting here?
Yeah, let's say if there's a really, like this is just a random tweet. Let's say it was like a really powerful tweet that really hit some truth that I'm proud, like impressed with. I could screenshot this, like make it large like this, screenshot it, just the tweet part, and make that into a photo to post on other platforms. And that's quite common. And it's also, I mean, if you're creating a lot of content, it's draining. It's hard to create a lot of content. So rather than create something fresh for every platform, it makes a lot of sense to put something on Twitter, screenshot it, throw that on Facebook and Instagram, and so on.
And see how you, as soon as you clicked on that, the URL at the top changed. You can also copy paste that URL.
Cool. Alex?
Hey, hi, Tim. That was great. Great comments. I would like to hear your feedback to my feedback. If you're posting a ton of content, retweeting and everything, and you're actually using an ID that's not associated with the person, but with the organization, do you think that there's a potential problem that you lose the message of your organization kind of in the clutter, where people who are following your ID stop following it because there's just too much stuff coming in that's just retweets? And then the second or corollary to that is, do you think that when you've got an organization Twitter handle, limiting the number of tweets you send so that it's consumable to most people, where they don't go, oh God, it's just more garbage from them? And I don't mean garbage, I mean more like it just starts to turn into chafe, you know? So that's the heart of my question.
Yeah, my experience is that it's not a big concern. Twitter is already basically like drinking from a fire hose, and a lot of the content comes from a few people posting all the time. As an organization, if you have the material to have fresh stuff to do, then post a bunch, and it's not going to hurt your cause. It's very unlikely people will unsubscribe for quantity. What they will unsubscribe for or unfollow for is quality. If you're way off topic or say something that really rubs them the wrong way, that's more likely to make them unsubscribe or unfollow rather. So yeah, usually you're going to be okay with that. And to that point, it's often useful to duplicate your tweets. If you've got an event coming up, post about it today, post about it 2 more days, post about it again 2 days after that. Like, get in the mix, because people are consuming Twitter, like I said, drinking from a fire hose. They're dipping in and dipping back out. It's very easy to miss a lot of stuff, especially if they're following a lot of people. So yeah, repetition is your friend.
Thanks, Tim.
No worries.
Wow. Okay, it's a lot of stuff to digest. Are there any more questions? We do have a poll that we would like you to answer, a very short one. But if there's any more questions, we won't go to the poll yet. No, I don't see any more questions, so we can start the poll. I guess I'll leave it to you, Alex, to how are we answering these? Sorry.
Oh, if you're a co-host, Carol, you will not be able to answer.
The
If
poll
I'm
is
what?
live, Carol.
Say that again, sorry?
Because you're a co-host, Carol, I don't know that
Oh,
you'll see the
you
poll.
don't want to know what I think. Okay. You already know what I think, all right?
But the poll is running right now.
Okay, good.
And we've had 5 of 11 participants, 7, 8. Do you want to let it run a little longer, Carol, or is that enough?
So that's the first 2 questions, right? And we've got 2 more questions, I think. Are
I'm
all
not
the
sure what you're-
questions?
that is the poll of the 4 questions.
Oh, that is? Okay.
Yeah.
I only see 2 in front of me, that's why. Okay, so we can end the poll. Thank you very much. And there's nothing much else to say except that thank you, Tim. Like, that is a lot of information you're giving us and a lot to digest. And I see that I still am on a huge learning curve with figuring out how to use Twitter effectively, but you've definitely given me some clues to get me going, and I know who to call if I need help, right? So,
Anytime.
yeah. And other than that, if anybody would like to say anything, I just thank you all for coming. This is the first webinar that Etobicoke Climate Action has had of this type. And, I'm very happy with the results. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl and Tim.
Thank you.
Ingrid, you got your hand up?
Ingrid,
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. And Tim and Carol, your dialogue between each other was really nice. Carol, you're asking questions that I think a lot of people want to ask but are afraid to. And Tim, you're answering those questions. And I think that's really important to engage where we're at. There's a lot of people learning technology. And I think tonight was a really nice way to introduce that to many people. So well done.
Thanks, Ingrid. Thank you. And thank you to Alex and Tim for running the tech. And thank you, of course, to Cheryl and Tim for speaking so well about their topics. And I think I'm running out of thank yous, but have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
I
Thanks,
hope
Phil.
to see you again.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I know.
Take care, everyone. I'll shut the meeting down.
Cool. Yeah.
Bye-bye.